there's the visual of this scene as it unfolds. Again, it appeals to me as somebody who loves food.
Oh, yes.
And so Satan comes with a challenge. And actually a few challenges. The first challenge, he says, if you're the Son of God. So that's the first challenge. Now, does Satan know that Jesus is the Son of God? Of course. But what Satan is trying to do is tell Jesus, hey, you got a problem. And if you're God, you can fix it. Mm-hmm. So that's the first challenge. He wants to tempt him. And what he wants to tempt him with is he says, you can tell these stones to become loaves of bread. And whenever I read those words, I picture Satan standing before Jesus with a platter of hot yeasty bread that's lightly toasted on top. Mm-hmm. And Shannon, I see butter dripping off of the sides. I see the fumes wafting up the top, and I see him waving it under Jesus' nose. Like, can you see it?
Mm-hmm. I can. And I just want to bite.
I know. And I'm gluten-free and I want to bite. And it is in this place where Satan tells Jesus, he said, you could tell these stones to become loaves of bread. And for us, we go, that doesn't feel very spiritual, that Jesus would be tempted with bread. That doesn't seem like a spiritual kind of problem. But how many of us, I call them the 4 binges, when we're not getting what we want, instead of pray, we will binge eat, we will binge buy, we will binge watch, and we will binge sleep. Mm-hmm. Because we've got this need that's deep inside of us that only God can fill, this hunger. And instead of turning toward God, we find other ways to pacify ourselves. Mm-hmm. But my favorite verse is in that next verse. But before I go to that, I mean, Shannon, what do you think about those 4 binges? Do you find that to be true in yourself and when you're talking with others?
Yes. And you know what I've noticed is if I'm fasting one of those, then my heart turns to the next one. So if I'm fasting food, well, all I want to do is sleep or go shopping or watch Netflix, or if I'm, my heart just craves just whatever will satisfy in that next binging way. And really it's such a challenge to channel my affections and desires back to God. And that's what Jesus is, he's taking this break. He's about to go into a very significant time of ministry. And he is fasting on purpose, right? And his fasting is designed to be in communion with God. And of course, the enemy wants to undo that.
Well, Jesus, in this last, we're going to kind of bring it to the climax of what we want to talk about today, because for any time where we feel like what we want, we can't have, it's not in our control. And rather than, because when we binge eat, we binge watch, we binge sleep, we binge buy, like that is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with buying something on Amazon. There's mm-hmm. nothing wrong with food. There's nothing wrong with taking a nap if you're stressed. There is nothing wrong. Like those things we're not saying in and of ourselves. But when that's the place where we're trying to satisfy ourselves, this is the direction that Jesus wants us to look toward. He says in verse 4, no, the scriptures say, people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Indeed, Jesus is actually quoting from Deuteronomy here. In fact, in all of these temptations, Jesus rebuts Satan from the book of Deuteronomy. And when I think about how Jesus is casting this vision, that bread is a temporal satisfaction. When we eat, we're going to get hungry again. And so what Jesus is saying is whatever it is that we want to consume, that we think is going to satisfy us in the place where we're not getting what we really, truly need, we're going to get hungry again. Mm. And as I thought practically for me about how do I embrace the wisdom that Jesus is teaching, for me, it's emotional eating. And so for me, like years ago, I had to stop keeping the foods that I would binge on in the house. And so years ago, I stopped buying desserts. I just had to, because our particular wilderness situation in our family, I was going to eat my way through it. Mm. But For other situations, I wrote out a Post-it note. And so Shannon can see it. And it depends on if we get a clip. I should have made it a different color, but it says reminder. Barb does not live by snacks alone, but by every word from God. And maybe you need to get a Post-it note, listener, and write, I do not live by Amazon shopping alone, but by every word that lives from the mouth of God. I do not live by Netflix alone. And to put that Post-it note by the areas where you're tempted to try to binge instead of relying on God's word. So that's something for me that's really practical, that helps me when I'm feeling tempted in a place where I'm struggling.
Oh, I love that. I love that. We're going to put that in the show notes, that little idea.
I wish,
maybe a picture of the...
Yeah, I would have to send you a picture of it because I should have gotten a lighter Post-it note. But yeah, it's been so helpful for me.
It's so good.